The SR-71 Blackbird didn't just break records, it shattered everything we thought was possible. Pilots wore spacesuits, the plane leaked fuel on the ground, and it flew so fast that missiles couldn't catch it. These are 20 weird facts about the SR-71 Blackbird, and the bonus. Let's just say this beast was designed by a genius who barely finished high school. Strap in. This ride breaks the sound barrier 3 times over. Designed by a high school graduate. The genius who designed the SR-71 Blackbird barely finished high school and never got a fancy engineering degree from a university. Clarence Kelly Johnson grew up dirt poor in Michigan and couldn't afford college when he graduated in 1929. He worked his way through the University of Michigan by doing odd jobs and nearly starved some semesters. He wasn't a typical bookworm engineer who only knew theories and math formulas. Kelly learned by building things with his hands and figuring out what worked in the real world. He went on to design some of the most important aircraft in American history, including the P-38 Lightning Fighter, the U-2 spy plane, and finally the incredible SR-71 Blackbird. He won every major award in aviation and aerospace engineering despite his humble beginnings. Johnson ran the top-secret Skunk Works division at Lockheed, where impossible planes became reality. He had 40 patents to his name and was called the greatest aircraft designer who ever lived by many experts. Only 32 were ever built. Lockheed only built 32 SR-71 Blackbirds in total, making it one of the rarest aircraft ever created by any country. Each plane cost approximately $34 million in 1960s money, which would be over $300 million today adjusted for inflation. The program was so expensive and secret that Congress constantly threatened to cancel it and save taxpayer money. Of those 32 aircraft, 12 were lost in accidents during the program's 30-year operational history from 1966 to 1998. No Blackbird was ever lost to enemy action, despite thousands of missiles fired at them over hostile territory. Most accidents happened during takeoff, landing, or refueling operations, rather than during the dangerous reconnaissance missions. Each lost aircraft represented an enormous loss of money and irreplaceable technology that took years to build. The remaining planes are now displayed in museums across the United States, where millions of people visit them every year. The most famous Blackbird sits in the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. The tires were filled with nitrogen. The SR-71's landing gear tires weren't filled with regular air like normal airplane or car tires use every day. They were filled with pure nitrogen gas because regular air would have caused serious problems during the extreme conditions of flight. The tires got so hot during landing at high speeds that regular air would have caused the rubber to catch fire or explode. Nitrogen doesn't support combustion like the oxygen in regular air does, so it made the tires much safer. The tires were also specially made from a compound that could handle temperatures over 400 degrees Fahrenheit during touchdown. Each tire cost thousands of dollars and could only be used a few times before needing replacement from the extreme stress. The tires were also aluminum coated to reflect heat and keep the rubber from melting completely during landing. Ground crews had to carefully monitor tire pressure and temperature after every flight before the plane could fly again. Landing the Blackbird was considered one of the most challenging tasks any pilot could attempt because of the extreme speeds involved. Officially, it didn't exist. For years, the United States government officially denied that the SR-71 Blackbird even existed at all as a real aircraft. The program was so secret that the plane's existence was classified top secret and kept from the American public and Congress. President Lyndon Johnson accidentally revealed the plane's existence during a press conference on February 29, 1964, surprising his own military advisors. He was supposed to call it the RS-71, but made a mistake and called it the SR-71 instead during his announcement. Rather than correct the President of the United States, the Air Force just changed all the paperwork to match what he said. The plane had been flying for months before the public knew it was real, and not just a rumor or science fiction. Pilots who flew it couldn't tell their families what they did for work, or what aircraft they flew for missions. Wives and children thought their husbands and fathers flew normal transport planes or bombers instead of the fastest plane ever built. The secrecy surrounding the program was so intense that even other military branches didn't know all the details of its capabilities. It leaked fuel on purpose. The SR-71 Blackbird leaked fuel all over the runway before every single takeoff, and that wasn't a mistake or a broken plane. Engineers designed it to leak on purpose because of something crazy about physics and heat. When the plane flew at Mach 3, which is 3 times the speed of sound, the outside skin heated up to over 600 degrees Fahrenheit from air friction alone. That's hot enough to melt lead and cook a pizza in seconds. The metal expanded so much from the heat that the panels grew several inches during flight. If they built the plane tight on the ground, it would rip itself apart in the sky from the expansion. So Lockheed engineer Clarence Kelly Johnson and his team at the secret Skunk Works factory made the panels loose on purpose. The plane only sealed up properly when it got screaming hot at high speed. Ground crews had to mop up thousands of gallons of leaked JP-7 fuel before every mission. The Blackbird would take off leaking, then meet a tanker plane to fill up completely once it got hot enough to seal the tanks. Pilots wore space suits. Every pilot who flew SR-71 had to wear a full pressure suit that looked exactly like what astronauts wear in space. These weren't regular flight suits or even fancy jet pilot gear. They were actual space suits that cost over $100,000 each and were custom made for every single pilot. The reason was terrifying but simple. The Blackbird flew at 85,000 feet altitude, which is over 16 miles above the Earth where the sky turns black. At that height, the air pressure is so low that your blood would literally boil inside your body without protection. If the cockpit lost pressure, the pilot had about 10 seconds to survive without the suit. The suit squeezed the pilot's entire body to keep blood from boiling and organs from failing. Pilots had to breathe pure oxygen for an hour before flying to get nitrogen out of their blood. Getting into the suit took 45 minutes with help from trained technicians. The suit was so bulky that pilots could barely move their arms and legs inside the cockpit. Faster than a rifle bullet. The SR-71 Blackbird flew faster than a bullet fired from a rifle, which sounds impossible but is completely true. The plane's top speed was officially Mach 3.3, which equals about 2,200 miles per hour at high altitude. A typical rifle bullet travels around 1,700 miles per hour when it leaves the barrel. That means if you shot a gun at the Blackbird from behind, the plane would actually pull away from the bullet. The pilot could theoretically outrun the bullet in a straight line race across the sky. No other manned aircraft that breathes air has ever gone faster in the history of aviation. The plane set the absolute speed record for air-breathing aircraft on July 28, 1976, flying at 2,193.2 miles per hour. That record still stands today almost 50 years later because nothing else can touch it. Test pilot Eldon Jorce and reconnaissance officer George Morgan flew that record-breaking mission over California. The windshield got hotter than an oven. The front windshield of the SR-71 reached temperatures over 600 degrees Fahrenheit during high-speed flight at Mach 3. That's way hotter than your kitchen oven when you bake cookies at 350 degrees. The windshield got so hot that pilots couldn't touch the inside glass even with gloves on without getting burned. Engineers made the windshield from special quartz glass that was over an inch thick and cost a fortune to manufacture. Regular airplane glass would have melted or cracked into pieces from the extreme heat of air friction. The titanium frame around the windshield glowed dull red during the hottest parts of the flight, according to chase plane pilots. Pilots said they could feel the heat radiating through their spacesuits even though the cockpit was air conditioned. The nose cone of the plane reached over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which is hot enough to melt aluminum and most metals. Everything about this plane was designed to survive temperatures that would destroy any normal aircraft instantly. It's from titanium from Russia. Here's one of the craziest secrets about the SR-71 Blackbird that stayed classified for decades. Most of the titanium metal used to build this American spy plane actually came from the Soviet Union, America's biggest enemy during the Cold War. The United States didn't have enough high-quality titanium to build the planes they needed for the secret program. The CIA set up fake companies and shell corporations around the world to buy Soviet titanium without Russia knowing where it was going. Russian miners dug the metal out of the ground, and Soviet factories processed it into sheets and bars. Then American spies secretly purchased it and shipped it to Lockheed's Skunk Works factory in California. The Russians had no idea they were providing the raw material for a plane designed to spy on them at impossible speeds. Kelly Johnson later admitted this was one of the most ironic things about the entire program. The enemy helped build the very weapon that would fly over their secret military bases and photograph everything, could survey 100,000 square miles per hour. The SR-71's cameras and sensors were so powerful that the plane could photograph 100,000 square miles of territory in just one single hour of flying. That's an area bigger than the entire state of Oregon, captured in detailed pictures in 60 minutes. The cameras could read a car's license plate from 80,000 feet up in the sky, which is over 15 miles straight down. Each camera system cost millions of dollars and used film that was specially made for the extreme cold and vibration of high-speed flight. The film magazines were the size of washing machines and held miles of special reconnaissance film. After each mission, technicians rushed the film to processing labs where analysts studied every tiny detail. The Blackbird could photograph an entire country's military bases, roads, and troop movements before anyone even knew it was there. The plane flew so high and so fast that by the time enemy radar detected it, the Blackbird was already gone and hundreds of miles away. Missiles couldn't catch it. During its entire service life from 1966 to 1998, over 4,000 missiles were fired at SR-71 Blackbirds by enemy countries trying to shoot them down. Not a single missile ever hit one. The plane's defense strategy was brilliantly simple. Just go faster and higher than anything chasing it. When missile warning systems detected an incoming threat, the pilot didn't turn or dodge like in movies. He just pushed the throttles forward and accelerated away from the missile. The Blackbird could actually outrun surface-to-air missiles that were designed specifically to destroy fast aircraft. Soviet SA-2 missiles that shot down Gary Powers in his slow U-2 spy plane couldn't touch the Blackbird. The plane flew over North Vietnam, North Korea, the Soviet Union, and other hostile countries hundreds of times without ever being hit. Enemy pilots and fighter jets tried to intercept it, but couldn't get close before it disappeared over the horizon. The Blackbird made fools of the world's most advanced air defense systems for over 30 years of secret missions. Special fuel that wouldn't ignite. The SR-71 used a special fuel called JP-7 that was so stable you could throw a lit match into a bucket of it and nothing would happen. The match would just go out like you dropped it in water instead of highly explosive jet fuel. Engineers designed this special fuel because regular jet fuel would explode from the extreme heat inside the Blackbird's fuel tanks at high speed. The tanks heated up to over 300 degrees Fahrenheit during Mach 3 flight from air friction on the plane's skin. Regular JP-4 fuel that other jets used would have blown up the plane from the inside from those temperatures. JP-7 had a very high flash point, meaning it needed extreme conditions to actually ignite and burn. The engines used a special chemical called triethylborane, which bursts into green flame on contact with air just to get the JP-7 to light. Pilots called this chemical TIEB, and each engine only had enough for a limited number of restarts during flight. If they ran out of TEB shots, they couldn't restart an engine that flamed out at high altitude. The engines were basically blowtorches. The Pratt & Whitney J58 engines on the SR-71 were unlike anything else ever built for an aircraft in history. At high speed, they became more like ramjets than regular jet engines, breathing in air at tremendous speeds and heating it to insane temperatures. Each engine produced 34,000 pounds of thrust with the afterburner on full blast during takeoff and acceleration. The exhaust coming out the back was so hot and powerful it could melt asphalt and concrete on the runway behind the plane. Ground crews had to use special heat shields and stay far away when the engines were running at high power. At Mach 3 cruise speed, the engines ran so hot that they glowed cherry red and orange, visible to pilots in chase planes. The inlet spike at the front of each engine moved automatically to control airflow at different speeds using complex computers. These engines burned 36,000 pounds of fuel per hour at full speed, which is about 5,000 gallons every 60 minutes. The plane could empty its entire fuel tank in less than 90 minutes at maximum speed if it didn't refuel from tankers. Pilots ate through a tube. SR-71 pilots couldn't eat normal food during missions because they were trapped inside bulky pressure suits for many hours. Instead, they ate specially designed tube food that looked and worked like toothpaste tubes but contained real meals. Pilots squeezed beef stew, mashed potatoes, pudding, and other foods through a special port in their helmet into their mouths. The food had to be pured smooth so it would flow through the small tube without clogging or or causing choking. Each meal was carefully designed by nutritionists to give pilots enough calories and energy for missions lasting 10 hours or more. The food came in special packaging that could survive the extreme cold of high altitude and the heat of the cockpit systems. Pilots practiced eating from tubes during training so they wouldn't make a mess inside their expensive helmets during real missions. Drinking water also came through a tube system connected to a special bag inside the suit. Many pilots said the tube food wasn't terrible, but it definitely wasn't like eating a real steak dinner at a restaurant either, or it stretched 6 inches during flight. The SR-71 Blackbird physically grew longer during high-speed flight because the metal expanded so much from intense heat. The plane stretched about 6 inches from nose to tail at Mach 3 cruise speed due to thermal expansion of the titanium structure. Engineers had to design special expansion joints throughout the entire airframe to handle this incredible growth without breaking apart. Fuel lines, hydraulic tubes, and electrical wires all had special flexible sections to accommodate the stretching. When the plane landed and cooled down, it shrank back to its original size over several hours as heat dissipated. Maintenance crews couldn't work on certain parts until the plane completely cooled because panels didn't line up right when it was still hot. The expansion caused the famous fuel leaks on the ground because tank seams only sealed properly when the plane was hot and stretched out. This thermal cycling put enormous stress on every part of the aircraft and required constant inspections and maintenance between missions. It could climb 60,000 feet in 90 seconds. The SR-71's climb rate was absolutely insane compared to any other aircraft that has ever existed in aviation history. The plane could rocket from ground level to 60,000 feet altitude in about 90 seconds when the pilot pushed the throttles forward. That's climbing 11 miles straight up in less time than it takes to brush your teeth in the morning. Commercial airliners take over 20 minutes to reach their cruising altitude of just 35,000 feet by comparison. Fighter jets that were considered fast climbers took several minutes to reach 60,000 feet if they could even get that high at all. The Blackbird would continue climbing to over 85,000 feet, where the sky turned black and stars were visible during daytime flights. Pilots described the climb as being pressed back into their seats harder than any roller coaster or carnival ride. The acceleration felt like an elephant sitting on your chest, according to veterans who flew the aircraft. This incredible climb performance helped the plane escape threats by simply going up where nothing could follow it. Pilots couldn't look back. The cockpit design of the SR-71 meant that pilots physically could not turn their heads to look behind them during flight. The pressure suit helmet was so bulky and the cockpit so cramped that rear visibility was essentially zero for the crew. This might sound dangerous, but at Mach 3, nothing was ever catching up from behind anyway, so it didn't really matter. The pilot sat in the front cockpit while the reconnaissance systems officer sat directly behind in a separate cockpit area. They communicated through the intercom system because they couldn't see each other or pass notes during the mission. Small mirrors were installed to give some rear visibility, but they weren't very useful at high speed when everything was a blur. The cockpit windows were small and provided limited visibility compared to modern fighter jets with bubble canopies. Pilots relied heavily on instruments, radar warning systems, and mission controllers on the ground for awareness of threats. The cramped conditions meant crews had to stay in the same position for many hours during long reconnaissance missions. It had its own weather. The SR-71 flew so fast that it actually created its own weather patterns and sonic disturbances wherever it went across the sky. The massive shock waves from the triple sonic boom rattled windows and scared animals for miles in every direction below. The plane's hot exhaust and disturbed air created small thunderstorms and turbulence that pilots following behind had to avoid carefully. Air traffic controllers had to clear huge sections of sky whenever a Blackbird was flying because other planes couldn't safely fly anywhere near it. The plane left a trail of superheated air behind it that took several minutes to cool down and return to normal conditions. Scientists actually studied the atmospheric effects of SR-71 flights to better understand supersonic travel and shockwave physics. Ranchers in Nevada and California complained about their cattle being spooked by the sonic booms that shook their barns and houses. The Air Force had to pay for broken windows and disturbed livestock when Blackbirds flew over populated areas during training missions. The last flight set speed records. When the Air Force retired the SR-71 on March 6, 1990, they decided to go out in the most spectacular way possible. The final flight from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. set 4-speed records that still stand today as proof of what this incredible machine could do. Major pilot Ed Yelding and Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Vita flew the 2,404 miles from coast to coast in just 64 minutes and 20 seconds. That's faster than most people's commute to work across a single city during rush hour traffic. They averaged over 2,100 miles per hour across the entire country, crossing multiple time zones in about an hour. The plane flew from Los Angeles to Washington faster than a pizza delivery driver could get across town in many cities. They set records for Los Angeles to Washington, Kansas City to Washington, St. Louis to Cincinnati, and coast to coast times that day. The plane landed at Dulles Airport and was immediately towed to the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, where it still sits today for millions to see. Ground crews used special tools. Working on the SR-71 required special tools that were unlike anything used on any other aircraft in military or civilian aviation. Titanium is incredibly difficult to work with because regular steel tools contaminate it and cause it to become brittle and weak. Mechanics had to use tools made from titanium or special alloys that wouldn't damage the plane's exotic skin and structure. All bolts, screws, and fasteners had to be made from matching materials that could survive the extreme temperatures of Mach 3 flight. Workers wore special gloves and hairnets because even skin oils and hair could contaminate the titanium surfaces during maintenance work. The Skunk Works factory developed hundreds of new manufacturing techniques just to build and maintain these 32 aircraft properly. Cadmium-plated tools that were standard in the aviation industry couldn't be used anywhere near the Blackbird's titanium structure. Training a single maintenance technician took months of specialized education that wasn't taught anywhere else in the world. Ground crews worked in small elite teams that took tremendous pride in keeping these legendary aircraft flying safely for decades. Bonus fact, Ben Rich made it invisible. After Kelly Johnson retired, his protege Ben Rich took over the Skunk Works and made the SR-71 even more incredible with stealth technology. Rich figured out how to add special coatings and shapes to the Blackbird that made it nearly invisible to enemy radar systems. The black paint that gave the plane its famous name wasn't just for looks or cooling purposes like many people think. It contained special radar-absorbing materials that swallowed radar waves instead of bouncing them back to enemy detection stations. The SR-71 became one of the first operational stealth aircraft ever built, years before the famous F-117 Nighthawk stealth fighter. Ben Rich went on to develop full stealth technology that changed warfare forever using lessons learned from the Blackbird program. He wrote a famous book about his experiences at Skunk Works that revealed many secrets after the Cold War ended. The Blackbird proved that American engineers could build things that seemed absolutely impossible to the rest of the world for decades. From leaking fuel on purpose to outrunning missiles, the SR-71 Blackbird proved that the laws of physics are more like suggestions when you have genius engineers and brave pilots. This incredible machine flew higher and faster than anything before or since, and it did it all while being shot at by enemies who couldn't touch it. If these facts blew your mind, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about machines that changed history forever. History forever.